Well, hello, 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 everyone, and welcome again to our monthly Facebook Live. This is Sharon, your retirement coach diva from Royalty Business Group, the premier financial and retirement coaching services here in the DC area. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, uh, TikTok, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. So this evening, I am delighted to have my guest, my friend here, Sabrina Hall. And Sabrina is coming to tell us how we can tell our story through our resume, because Sabrina is an expert in resume writing. She has her own business, Empower You, resume advisory and coaching services. And so I'm excited to have Sabrina here. We've been talking about this for a long time, and finally we're able to get this together. So welcome, Sabrina. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day again. Love your background. We got
Thank
on the red popping this evening, so we are excited about this. So again,
Absolutely.
everybody that is online, please make sure that you like and share this, because we want this valuable information to be shared with others. So Sabrina, tell us a little bit about yourself as we get started.
Sure. So I'm originally from the Landover, Maryland area. So I help job seekers put their best self on paper and discover how they can use their transferable skills to land a job that they love. So I've
Okay.
been doing that since 20, probably before 2017, but I made it a business in 2017. So
All
I
right.
really enjoy that experience, just working with clients so that they can discover certain things that they kind of don't pay attention to when they write their resumes.
Right. So that's great to hear. So what made you start to help others with their resume?
Sure. So I think for me, I can identify with a job seeker. I used to, um, apply for jobs, weren't getting any hits, change it over several million times. So I was to a point in my career in which I was a little frustrated. I went back to school, got the master's. I was trying to move up in my current job, and I just wasn't moving up.
Mhm.
So during that period, I ended up doing a faith walk and I just left. But what I learned is it's so important to get your mindset right, right? Um, so I got my mindset right. And then I start visualizing like, hey, what do I want my dream job to look like? So, fast forward, I landed a great job that was, a dream to me, great benefits, a manager who was nurturing. So I just took that same concept and to help people. Like I started helping out my friends. They would, ask me to do their resume. And then I just made it, like I said, turn it into a business, made it into a profit. But with that said, it's just so important. Like I definitely enjoy doing this. Um, you know, I get a chance to meet a variety of people. And then I oftentimes come across, like, for example, women. We don't tend to sell ourselves like we should, in my opinion. Like, men are great at that. But us, it's just like we'll take on a project and then it's like, oh, well, I just did that one time. And it's a leader, it's a project. You had a role in it. You probably showed some leadership skills and it's important to write it down. So that's what I do. When I work with a client, I kind of pick their brain. We kind of go through a resume checklist. And my goal is to find leadership abilities that we can put on a resume as well as quantify your results. It's so important. A lot of people tend to don't do that.
Mm. So that's interesting. That's interesting that you said that. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is, like, who are your target audience? Who are the people that you normally work with?
Great question. It's usually mid professionals. Every now and then I'll get an executive director, but it's mid professionals just trying to figure out next steps in their career.
Mhm.
Sometimes people tend to fall in a career. So it's that's all they know. But it's just those people who, they're tired of doing whatever they want to do, or, their current job that they're in, and they just want to, make a change, transition to something else. So it's a variety of people. Like I've worked with students, high school students, entry level from terms of college to executive professionals.
Okay, all right. So I want to make sure that everyone that's listening right now, whatever comments or questions you have for Sabrina, please make sure you type it into the chat. Sabrina's information, so you can follow her or contact her directly, is in the chat. So Sabrina, you mentioned about selling ourselves, right? Because in the resume, we are not only telling our stories, but we have to sell ourselves. And you said that there's a difference. You found that there's a difference in how men come across to sell themselves through their resume versus women. Tell us some of the things that you found that would be helpful for our listeners, our women out there, because they also could be some men who might have this issue too. But just what are a few things that you found that is helpful?
So I think that people don't get deep in the details, right? They're very, I guess, visionary. And I'm just going to use an example. So, for example, we could look at a receptionist, and one may say, oh, well, she just answer phones and make coffee, answer the door. So I kind of go in to say, okay, well, this person is a liaison to the director. I have to go through her to get to the director. When she answered those inquiries, whether it's on the phone or in person, she has to, she has to provide feedback. Hey, the person's not there. She gives advice, as well as I'm trying to think anything else she does, but it's more than mailings. She deals with the day-to-day operations. So again, I just go in and just look at it from a different vantage point. So in terms of like details, I believe sometimes people tend to omit important projects. Like, for example, some people deal with community service or volunteer, whether it's church or, with the Girl Scouts. And people tend to dismiss that, like, oh, I stood there and gave out cookies, or we collected backpacks. So my goal is, let's talk about accomplishments. Let's talk about impact. Okay, we collected a number of book bags, and this will impact these children that need book bags. Like, I talk out the process with the people, with the clients. So I just think that's important. I think that, everyone's a leader in their position. So it's so important to speak leadership talk. And it's cool to utilize like your transferable skills. So for example, fundraising. If you're a fundraiser, you're collecting, let's just say Girl Scout cookies, you're raising funds, that should be able to translate into financial skills. You've managed a certain budget. How much is in the red and what's in the green and so forth. So like, that's really my goal. Like, how can we put our heads together and come up with a product that's going to build your confidence, so when you go apply to jobs, you feel like you can actually compete, with that other person.
Now, we know that people apply for jobs, various types of jobs. So how do you help them, your clients, when there might be a job that might want to tailor it to a specific job, but you don't want to continue to have to change the resume with every job?
So I'm going to tell you that there is no one size fit all resume. Unfortunately, you're going to have to tailor that resume to fit the job description. So it's so good to review the job description, and anything that says preferred, I would say apply for. When it's, there's certain things that you can negotiate with preferred. I prefer you to have a bachelor's degree. I prefer you to have this particular skill set. You can negotiate that. Now, if it's required, unfortunately, there's no way around that. I mean, you could always put in your resume and have them tell you no, but when looking at a job description, it's really best to go with the preferred. It's like, oh, okay, preferred. Okay, well, let me, and again, tailor your resume to fit that job description. That means utilizing keywords. You have to speak the language in that job description. Like, it's so important. And also, I would say write a cover letter. Talk about your accomplishments. It's good to sell yourself. Talk about, an accomplishment could be, I raised the number of funds. I spearheaded a project. I saved money. I saved this amount of dollars. I was nominated to serve as backup to a supervisor. Like, really talk about those accomplishments.
Okay, all right. So now that you talked about how you do like an intake with your clients, how do you lay out the resume? Like, what would be the first information? Because we see a lot of resumes, and they say that they should be more than a certain number of pages, or you shouldn't go back past a certain number of years. How would you lay out a resume? Let's say, for example, like you mentioned that you work, sometimes you work with students. So how would you lay out a resume for a student or someone who's just coming into the workforce?
So for me, I look at volunteer experience. I think it's great that the county or schools are implementing volunteer service. That is your way to create a great resume, and you can transfer those skills into the job you want. For example, you working on a team. We got to work on teams, in the workforce. You having communication skills, excuse me. That's translate to presentation skills in the workforce. So what I pretty much do, I review a person's resume. So if we're talking about a high school student, right, we're going to talk about number one, I guess, where is this resume going? We're going to talk about maybe classes that can translate. We're also going to talk about, their aspirations as well. And then depending on the job, then I really try to work with them on a job. So for example, let's take Chick-fil-A. So, you have a team member who works for Chick-fil-A. So what I do, okay, you're supposed to, manage funds in the register. You take credit card payments. You have to make sure those orders are right. If there are problems, you have to rectify the issue, unless you have to escalate it to a manager. So I kind of speak that lingo. My goal, to be honest, I want to make sure my client is comfortable with the language.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to speak higher.
Right.
Yeah, and with your resume kind of goes back to knowing your audience. I'm not going to provide language on a high school student's resume that should be on a mid-professional's resume.
Right. Okay.
So teamwork. So for example, high school teamwork is cool on a student's resume.
Right.
A mid-professional will say, collaboration, collaborative team or cross-functional team environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So we have a couple of comments in here that I'm gonna read out. First of all, Wendy says that that her son definitely needs a professional postgraduate resume. So you talked about coming straight out of high school, someone who has graduated from college, what would you recommend would be in their resume?
So it just depends on their background. So I know when I started out, just being totally transparent, I used the courses that I completed in school. For example, if I did marketing, speech communication. So just utilize, you have completed those subjects. So you're not, fibbing. Is how do you articulate that to translate into the workforce? So if you are social worker or social sciences, you all work with statistics, SPSS, that translates into the workforce as a database.
Right.
Same thing, just different language. Just again, knowing your audience.
Okay. And so let's move on to someone who is further along, been in the, workforce maybe 5 to 10 years, and they're looking to move or advance into a different role. How would you advise them to say, hey, you're trying to advance, let's see what is it that you need to do? What would you discuss?
So I would discuss, like, let's look at your background to see, like, in what ways can we advance? So for example, have you ever served as backup to your supervisor? Right? If that supervisor has entrusted you to, take over for him or her, that is one skill. I always look at money, even something small as, let's just say, an office manager. Some office managers deal with petty cash. Well, how much was the petty cash? Oh, $2,000. So this is how you're building your financial skills. So in an old job of mine, we used to hire temps to do the work. So of course I have managerial skills because I manage those temps. I was able to communicate with the temp agency, telling them the hours of operation and the tasks that needed to be completed. So I kind of look at, in what ways can we advance? I think people minimize community service. There is so much that you can use with your community service. So for example, I served on the board, right? So I can talk about, how much funds I raised,
right,
making fiscal decisions, making decisions on program initiatives. So I can speak that lingo that would translate into a better paying job.
Okay.
I think it's important. Also, too, when those people are looking for a job, I advise, don't focus on the title. That was a mistake. So I'm from the nonprofit sector, love the nonprofit sector dearly, but we live some jobs, you living off the love. I'm gonna be respectfully. You're a director, right. 80 words a minute, but they want to pay you $20,000 a year.
Right.
So with that said, I say utilize keywords that's in the sector that you want, you want to go into that particular industry. Okay, so maybe the job titles are not working. Let's utilize the keywords. Sometimes you got to go backwards to get the job that you want. And right. Then another thing, we underuse, for those of people who went to college, you have a whole network to tap in. If you're on LinkedIn, tap into that. Tap into that source. Also, we have friends. I've sent resumes. Hey, I'm looking for a job. Let me know what you think, and follow up. Don't be scared to follow up. People are busy. They're not ignoring you, and it's just so important. Like, they said, I've done network marketing at one point in time. We know 1,000 people dead or alive, right?
Right. Yeah.
So with that said, let's tap into our network.
Right.
And sometimes it's good to do informational interviews. I've had strangers who want to help me. maybe my friends can't, but strangers are open to helping me. So I would say reach out to that person on LinkedIn,
Right.
have coffee with them, and follow up. Yeah, don't be scared to follow up. This is your career. It's so important just to not leave no stone unturned.
Yes, yes, definitely giving some great stuff. So let's go back to a high school student because Tashima put into the chat, what recommendations would you give a young person who does not go to college but has minimal work experience out of high school?
Again, so I would encourage that person to volunteer. Volunteer at a nonprofit. You can volunteer, if you have a family friend who has a business. It's just so important. I don't even care. So, for example, I supported a nonprofit who they do services for low income seniors in Washington, D.C. They have an age in place. And some services are like, providing cleanings to these seniors, cutting grass. I mean, we look at it as so mundane, but you're able to follow directions. We're keeping these people in their homes longer. So volunteerism is so important. Yeah, I just can't stress volunteerism.
Right.
Let's not minimize like, oh, I gotta clean up their house. I haven't even cleaned up my room. No, but it's just bigger. We're keeping these seniors in their house. And just kind of FYI, like, if you're a senior citizen, like we have African Americans in Washington, D.C., they own their homes. They're like I think the oldest population that own their homes. But with that said, the city will find them if their grass is high. If their parents, that's if children who live in another state, they don't have that person. So again, my goal is always when working with a client, let's think bigger. Let's step out of the current situation and think bigger. So I really highly suggest him like volunteering, putting in applications, following up. It's so important to follow up. People are busy. They're not ignoring you. And then sometimes, I will say, depending on when did you put the application in, for example, summertime, everybody's on vacation. So they probably not going to call you back as you want them to call you back. So we got to kind of grant grace in that area. But your goal is to follow up. And I really encourage people, whether it's student, maybe put in, your resumes, maybe 3 to 4 times a day. Don't overextend yourself. Because it's frustrating, looking for a job. It's frustrating.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You did all you could do. You've done your best. So 3 or 4 applications a day. I think that's fine.
Yeah, yes. I remember someone saying that they put in like 150 applications, for federal jobs, and it was that 150th one that they got the job. So
yeah,
and just doing small bits, that makes sense to do it so you won't feel overwhelmed trying to do like 10 to 20 a day. So that because if you have to review it to make sure that it's kind of tailored to each job, then that's already going to take up some time. So you have to make sure that, you're not spending your whole day doing all this, like you said, maybe 4 resume submissions a day, reviewing it and submitting sounds like a great task. So I do want our listeners to know that in the chat, I have dropped in Sabrina's information. Please reach out to her, start following her on LinkedIn, Instagram. Make sure you reach out to her if you have any questions, and like and share this event that's going on right now so others can know what's going on and they too can learn about how to build and share their story through their resume. So Sabrina, just kind of going back we did the progression from high school to college. Now and then you have like someone who's trying to move up into leadership. How about those of us,
Mhm.
I'm gonna point to me, who have been in a position for 20 or so years and now looking to, okay, I want to do something different. Like, how do you help those persons to create their resume so it can say, okay, I want to move into a different career field, or, be, just in something to do something different, because we may have been working for a long time, but doesn't mean that we've been at the same place for a long time. We could have been in the same position for a long time. So, or same type of work rather. So how do you help that person who resume would normally be long, I would say like 4 or 5 pages. And if I remember correctly, resumes with employers, they want it kind of simple, they want it short, maybe 2 pages at the most. So how do you help someone has a long career?
Yes, so pretty much my seasoned clients, I just have a conversation with them to let them know ageism is very real. So in order for me to prevent ageism on your resume, I start taking dates off. So those people who graduated in 1980, it comes off. So the goal is to go back 10 years in terms of your resume. Now, I can show those positions that you've done, right? But I won't have a date next to it. And I don't necessarily go in detail unless it's up to the client. And I think part of taking, like I said, the going back 10 years, of course, to prevent ageism, and you have progressed in your career. Why do you want to show that you was an office manager in 1979? Like, why?
Right.
So I just think it's so important. Like, let's keep it progressive. Let's use the industry terms, the current terms, even those in software. I came across software clients. They're mentioning IBM. You are, telling your recruiter or your hiring manager how old you are. So that's the goal, just more of condensing the resume, utilizing the keywords, actually adding a summary of qualifications. And the summary of qualifications pretty much sums up what you currently do. And it's just think about it. If a recruiter has, let's just say, 7 to 8 seconds to review your resume, what do you want the recruiter to know? So they're not going to go back to 1979. It just says, it just screams to them that you're old, respectfully. So that's the goal, just to keep it relevant and current. And also, I think it's important to, if you're doing a career change or industry change, write a cover letter. Like, a cover letter can kind of speak to either those gaps or what you're trying to do. Yeah. So I just, it's important to show like, hey, again, transferable skills are great for every industry. There's certain skills that go great for every industry: presentation, collaboration. So utilizing those, how can I use those transferable skills to this next industry? Okay. And then anything that may appear to be a gap, let me write it in a cover letter. Like, hey, I have an interest, for example, those who have pets and maybe they want to, work at a veterinarian clinic. Right. So you could talk about, your love for pets in your cover letter, and you're looking to transition into, being more hands-on with pets.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And so you had mentioned about the cover letter, and that's something I want to ask you about. What is the purpose of a cover letter? because, you know, I always wonder, like, I saw it as an introduction, but you had mentioned about including, accomplishments or just about, now it kind of explaining gaps and things. What is the purpose of a cover letter?
I think it introduces the employer to you. Who are you? What can you do? How can you assist them? Again, you're talking about your accomplishments. So, your first paragraph is, the job, the background, how did you find out? The second one, you talk about your win. Again, did you save money? All companies want someone to help them save money.
Right.
Did you improve a work process? Brag on that. And then talk about your words, your core competencies. You're proficient in another language. You have project management skills. Those you could talk about those transferable skills just to kind of reiterate. And then, closing, give them something to do. I look forward to talking to you. Call me, make it easy for them to contact you. But that's pretty much what the cover letter does. It's an introduction. You brag about your accomplishments. And you just give one tidbit. It could be something you have taken from the resume, or it could be some other accomplishment. So, for example, you're in a call center, right? And you had to, there were a number of calls in queue, right? And that might happen just this day is busy. So you could talk about how, we had 40 people in queue and I was responsible for, backing up someone, etc. So I was responsible for clearing the queue. I mean, it could be something that is not on the resume. Are you going to talk about clearing queues on your resume? You maybe not, right? Or you could talk about how you were nominated to work on a project by your supervisor. So one example I could give, like when I was an office manager, they had benefits for paper and then they translated it into online. So I was a benefits champion because I was following up with staff to make sure that they selected their benefits online. Now, did that go on my resume? I mean, I may have forgot, because I did it like one time, but that is an accomplishment. That's my bragging right. So.
I'll say, okay. And then you would include that in the resume as well?
Yes. So I definitely would include that with my resume. Now, I would really encourage everyone, when you read a job description, just follow directions. If you don't follow directions, so if they ask for a cover letter, give them a cover letter and resume. I have applied for positions where it gets to a point and maybe I just want to give them a cover letter. There's nowhere to put the cover letter. So I have combined the document to make sure they get a chance to know who I am. But really the goal is to follow instructions. Again, format that resume to fit that job description. I cannot stress that enough. And follow directions. That's really it. And I know some people are into like the government jobs. The government jobs are a little more, what's the word? Difficult. I wasn't trying to use difficult. They're a little more tedious. You got to be a little more creative. But I think the goal is to, whatever your career and your background, it has to fit. It has to align, and you have to speak the language in that job requisite or job description for your resume.
Okay. So how do you apply for a job and still use, like you mentioned earlier, about your community service or volunteer service or things like that? How do you make sure that all aligns up so you can, apply for a job?
Sure. So, so it depends. So, for example, we have a job. So your work experience don't really translate to the job, but the community service does, right? So, I would speak about it again. Try to format that experience of the community service to fit that job description, but also talk about it in the cover letter. Hey, I was a member of this organization and we ran an initiative to collect lawn care donations and we raised over $500. So I think it's important to make sure that I feel like spelling it out on the resume. It's important to spell it out on a resume as well as your cover letter. You don't want to have the recruiter guessing. Like we don't want the recruiter to ever guess. Like,
Okay.
well, how does this translate to that?
Right.
You're not going to have that opportunity, So yeah, I think that's where a cover letter would come in to, hey, when I was working, when I was a board member for this organization. And also, to me, community service shows that you're active. Are you a board member by name? Are you volunteer by name? I mean, whether it's passing out food to the homeless, it's just those things. It's important to kind of like your document is to brag on yourself.
Right,
so
right.
why don't we, I guess, why don't people brag on themselves? This is an opportunity to brag.
Yeah, so you talking about bragging. You mentioned before about how you see where men promote themselves more than women. What do you think that comes from? Like,
that's a good question. I just think it's confidence. And I know it just depends on, culturally, certain women, we don't want to seem aggressive, right? Unfortunately, but I think it's important to so for example, if we look at networking, I've seen men, I'm talking, he's still trying to fill the person out. I saw a man come in, hey, how you doing? So blah, 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 blah. And it was like, wow, my chocolate. But I mean, I just think it's courageous to step up and, hey, I mean, was it socially awkward? I mean, I guess it just depends on the person. Whereas us women, we tend to, like I said, dismiss certain skill sets. Oh, well, I helped out one time. Why not brag on it? Right. Or some people just they're not confident and it shows in their resume. So, again, if you don't have the confidence, it's one thing. You have resume writers to, hey, maybe I can't speak the lingo. But your resume writer or coach should be able to assist you in speaking the industry language. I've had people where I've written a resume for them and it's slang. So, and one example is the construction site, right? They have slang certain equipment, and I'm like, hey, so what exactly is it? So really, again, making sure they speak the industry language. Maybe the recruiter might know the lingo, but maybe not. Let's not leave it up to chance. So, I'm really big on that. I am attention to detail. I look at your dates. If the dates aren't looking right, I'm saying something. I'm not leaving nothing up to chance. So I don't want my client to leave nothing up to chance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I know that I have talked to people who have, struggled with putting their resume together And I've even got a list of words from someone who was like, you know, these are keywords to use. But if you don't really know how to put those words together for it to fall into place, it's just words on a paper, you know. So
Absolutely.
that makes sense, what you were saying. But I'm also thinking about, you were talking about the recruiter, right? So, and you mentioned about federal government, because we have a lot of federal government employees within the DC area and those who log into this Facebook Live. And from what I know, there is a system, and they probably use that in the private sector as well, where you're going to submit your information online. Everything is done online now. And you submit your resume or you fill out the information online, and then it goes through like this system that is going to pull out keywords.
Mhm.
Before the actual hiring manager gets it, the recruiter does this to, you know, get they're eligible, and you know, those who are eligible for the positions. How do you make sure that when it goes through this system, that your clients are part of that top list that gets sent to the hiring manager?
So this is what I will say. I think it's important to have your mindset has to be together, right?
Mhm.
And what I mean to say, like for me, I say what's for me is for me. You know, no one is in my place. The job is for me, whatever that is, right? So the federal government, so first things first, there's an applicant tracking system.
Right.
We have to format that resume to fit that job description.
Mm-hmm.
That is just number one. But number two, again, if it's your job, you're going to get it. You have to speak those things as though they were. And I really mean that. I applied for a federal government position. And this particular agency, it was told to me. So I got through the ATS. Maybe they had about 50, let's just say they had 50 applicants, right? They might have looked at the first 10. Now, I've worked directly with this particular office as a government contractor. I could tell you who used to work in that position.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even get selected to get to speak to the director. Mm-hmm. So I say though that to say this, like again, we have to, your mindset is important. Again, mm-hmm. You know, what's for you is for you. It's not to connect it to no one else. No, you know, no one's sitting in your job.
Right.
So when you have that attitude, and if you get through, great. And if you don't, something better is coming. And mm-hmm. That's the mindset that you have to have. Like you can pay a resume writer to do this federal government job, but if it's 50 applicants and they decide to take the first 5, you know, it's just unfortunate. You have nothing to do with that. You could be number 1, but what mm-hmm. if they just, you know, so I don't want people to get like focused because it's discouraging. Right. I've applied to federal jobs and it's like, dang, I'm qualified. I'm highly qualified, but not right. that qualified. It's like, what does that mean? It messes with your esteem. It does. So you have right. to, you know, to me, be creative. So for example, I always tell people, if they're in the financial arena, it's great right. because they can be government contractors. Those jobs would transition into government. Right. You find the agency that wants to transition that position into government. Mm-hmm. That program management, I can't speak on that, but I've seen with my own eyes financial jobs transition into government.
Right, right. And there are jobs out there that can transition from one industry to another. I've seen people go from federal government into private sector that whatever they were doing in the federal government just transitioned to that private sector yes. position. So, you know, it works both ways. I do want to kind of go back to what you had mentioned a while back, and that was about using industry language or, you know, acronyms, like I said, you work in the federal government as a contractor. We have federal employees who come in. We assume sometimes that when you go from one agency to the other, that the same acronyms and things, that it just goes over. How do you make sure that when you are working with someone, their resume, whether it's federal or within the private sector, that those acronyms that we're so used to talking about and saying that they are transitioned to, so the recruiter knows exactly what they're talking about.
Yes, so it's so important to spell those acronyms out. Again, this recruiter, we have to treat the recruiter as if they do not know this particular industry you're coming from. So I always encourage people to spell it out and then put the acronym. And then, if you have to refer to your acronym later in your resume, then, that's fine. But it's good to spell stuff out. Yeah, good. Yeah, like I said, good to spell it out. So there's no misinterpretation. And then there are industry words that, there's certain words that are known as an acronym. So for example, AP is accounts payable. Wherever you go is accounts payable. Right. So if you can, just try to find those lists of words that translate in all industries. But otherwise, it's just so important to spell it out.
Okay. All right. So we still have some time left. Just want to hear from you, what are maybe the top 3 or 4 tips that you would say these are things that you must have in your resume?
Must. Good question. So I think it's good to, if you can, depending on your industry. So of course, have proper grammar, etiquette. Also, email address that's working. That's it's not offensive. It's good to, if you're a supervisor, speak to those supervisory skill sets. Whether it's, delegating tasks, work scheduling, putting people on performance improvement plans, hiring, interviewing. So it's just good to have those particular skill sets on there. Those are the things that I see, again, what people do wrong when I receive a client. So, the dates are wrong. I can tell. So if you are a client and, for example, and we're getting to know each other. Right. And you tell me you're a supervisor, I don't see that you've interviewed no one. I don't see that you hire anyone, performance plans. And then also, too, I want to drive home. If you're a manager, you need to show that you're either a manager of people or processes or both, right? Okay, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. People don't really show that. It's like, oh, I'm a manager. Manager of what?
Right. That makes sense. You said a couple of things that really hit home to me. Grammar, making sure that not only that the spelling is correct, but it makes sense, that the sentence or the paragraph, whatever, makes sense, it's grammatically correct. Also, our personal email address. You don't want booty shaker or anything else. Yes. Probably best to use your name or something that will look a little professional. Not even, it don't include, this is what I personally say, try not to include your date of birth or anything like that, because that's personal information. You mentioned about ageism. So if you put in there, something that's close to the year that you're born, it's like, oh, we know how old you are based on that information. And then just making sure that, you say the dates are correct. So you want to make sure that everything, it lines up properly. But again, you said earlier about how you don't want to have too much dates because of the ageism again, and you don't want that to be,
Yes. So
impacting someone.
I would say don't go past technically 10 years. So anything past 2013, just chop it off. Again,
Right,
you're able to show it without the dates, and you don't necessarily
right.
have to go into details, especially if you've progressed in your career.
Mhm.
But
Right.
yeah, I would say, 2013, and less, chop it off.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And you mentioned about supervisory, so I want to kind of hit on that just a little bit in the time that we have left. Supervisory versus leadership. When someone, like you said, mentioning about supervisor hiring, those technical things that you have to do as a supervisor, okay, making sure that that's there. But what about those leadership skills that may not come or normally don't come as a supervisor? How do you make sure that they may show those leadership skills that they have, even if they have never been a supervisor?
Again, it comes down to language. So, like
Mhm.
leading a project. So,
Mhm.
I always say everyone has project management skills,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? If you've planned your own birthday party, you have, if you plan
Right,
a birthday party or a
right, right.
family reunion, like everyone has project management skills. So, with that project management, you've led a task, right? You
Mhm.
delegated responsibility. You had to review a budget. So
Mhm.
leadership can also take initiative, even if
Mhm.
you were in a team environment. There's a way to show that, yeah, I collaborated with a team. I was responsible for the implementation of X. But again, it comes down to playing with these words.
Right.
Supervisor is a little different because they're managing people, but leadership is managing a process and also the organization and so forth.
Mhm.
Just depending on your title in your company.
Right, right. And team lead too, because you could be managing people and making sure their work is done, but not necessarily have the supervisory responsibility. So making sure that that's distinguished as well, because the technical things about being a supervisor, you can learn as a supervisor, but leadership, I think, is something that, comes with time, and you always start early on. So going back to the beginning when you talked about as someone coming out of high school or college, that community or volunteer service they had, organizations that they might have been a part of, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. Um, I don't know if they even still have this, and well, Young Marines, certain things like that. They can always pull back from school, church, community, all
Yeah.
those things that they can use in their resume. So Sabrina, I just want to make sure that everyone that's listening to us now and in the future knows how to contact you. So even though it's in the chat, this is
Yes.
going to be put on YouTube. So if you could just say what your information is, so those who are going to be listening through YouTube are able to contact you.
Yes. So I have empoweryourresume.com, which is my background. You can contact me on LinkedIn, which is Sabrina E. Hall. Also, Facebook at Empower Your Resume and IG at Empower Your Resume. Also, if you want to send me an email, it's info@empoweryourresume.com.
All right. So LinkedIn, Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
IG,
Instagram.
her website, email, we got
Yeah.
it everywhere. You can't say that you don't know how to get in touch with her. It's been right here in your face the whole time for her website. So you make sure that you go to her, ask her questions, like and share this information for others so they too can know about how they can tell their story through their resume and advance their careers to the next level. So Sabrina, thank you so much for being my guest here this
Thank
evening. I
you. This has
truly
been fun.
appreciate you on this Valentine's
Yes.
Day evening to take the time out. And for those of you who are listening, I do appreciate you coming on and listening to us. For next month, the month of March, on March 13th, I'm going to be having some young adults coming in and talking about their businesses that they've started in the hair and cosmetic industry. So I make sure you come, because I'm gonna tell you, I know these young people, I've known them since they were children. And to see them grow up and doing, one has their own, starting their own braiding. Another one has opened up their business where they have, I want to tell you so much, but one is just having his own location where you can rent the booths. Another one that I'm hoping to have one that has his own cosmetic line. So make sure you join me on March the 13th at 7:30 Eastern time. But again, this information, if you didn't catch all of it, it will be on my YouTube channel, Royalty Business Group. Like and share, subscribe to the channel. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so two things. For the month of February, I am giving 10% off resume writing and coaching services. And I will provide free services for those for 2 people who are unemployed, and they have to show proof that they're unemployed. So I will provide complimentary services to 2 people unemployed. Also, 10% off resume writing and coaching services for the month of February.
Okay, so you said 10% off your services for the month of February, and
2 people who are, unemployed, life is happening, I will do their resume complimentary service.
Okay, so we're gonna say the first 2 people that contact you.
Yes. First 2 people who contact me who has proof that, they're unemployed and they're looking for, they need services, it'll be complimentary.
Okay. Okay, I'm putting this in the chat. First 2 people that contact Sabrina that are unemployed and need a resume.
You have to show proof.
Okay. Must show proof.
Yes.
Of unemployment. And when is the last day we know about the services as far as the 10% off, but when is the last day that they need to contact you if they are unemployed?
So I'll do it for the month of February. Yeah, before February 29th. That's it.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Yes.
So this, let's see, it ends February 29th.
29th, yes.
All right. And that is of 2024. We want to make sure they know that.
2024, yeah.
In case somebody comes up in the future.
Yeah.
All right.
It has been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much again for being a part of this. And I know that I've known you for several years now, so I know that you and your business will continue to grow and prosper in the future. And thank you everyone for joining us, and you have a great evening. Good night, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.